Peter, how are you, sir?
I'm good. It's so interesting looking at what's happened to New York City politics since the last time I was on here.
Oh, yeah, a lot has happened. Peter, let's start with the recent piece that you wrote related to the organizing around the Democratic nominees' plans in Albany, right?
Yeah.
That there's sort of a hand-in-glove relationship between the outside-inside force.
Absolutely.
And that the DSA is planning and or organizing around how do they push his initiatives. But wait, let's take a step back. You're a ringer because you're a former card-carrying member of the DSA, so you get a lot of information that people are not traditionally privy to. So that's actually a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing.
You know, for so long, people did not take the DSA seriously, and people did not take me seriously when I wrote about them as a political force. You know, I know people in the DSA very well. I knew Zoran very well, and I was writing about, I was the one who broke the news when he was first considering running. And when I broke the news, no one took it seriously. They're like, what, this 33-year-old socialist? Like, how is he going to appeal to, ordinary Democrats? But I believed that he had a strong strategy. I believed that DSA knows how to organize, how to get volunteers out. So I thought it was definitely possible. I didn't know if he would win, but I thought he was definitely a viable candidate. And so to see him actually win the Democratic nomination was very validating for me, because this is a political movement that I have taken seriously for years now. And so to see everyone else coming around like, oh, actually the DSA is very organized and can make a difference in New York City Democratic politics has been very refreshing.
Look, I've seen it from up close. I saw it initially with Congressmember Ocasio-Cortez. But when you think about the geography, and there's been certain pockets, right, that are sort of considered North Brooklyn, parts of Bushwick, Western Queens. But Caban came really close.
Absolutely.
So this notion that, there's still parts of Eastern Queens, I don't think that's accurate, because it was only a handful of votes, right?
Right.
And you figure in today's day and age, that outcome may not be the same.
No, I think Caban would easily
and when you think about even Kristen Gonzalez, Senator Gonzalez, represents parts of Manhattan.
Yes.
So the territory is expanding in what we've seen in this race, right?
Yes.
Congressmember Jamal Bowman, an argument can be made for the Bronx as well, right?
Yeah, Bowman obviously lost re-election. That was after redistricting put more of his district in Westchester.
And the other thing people feel when I'm looking back was the sort of anti-IDC movement was largely driven by a sort of progressive left, not necessarily DSA, but it demonstrated that there was a real sort of the progressive movement was woke, right?
Yes.
They were paying attention that there were Democrats that were caucusing with Republicans, right? In a post-Trump election as well.
Yes.
Which sort of like, why are these people aligned with Republicans? That's not right. And we're not going to allow that, right? So people underestimated the notion that people weren't educated or people weren't paying attention, right? So I think it's more complex than just certain pockets, and that's what we saw with the outcome of the primary.
Yeah.
Meaning the affordability message, or I can't pay my rent, sort of trumped. I don't care if the guy's right, a socialist, a communist. I've heard one senior tell me what caught his attention was freeze the rent.
Right.
Like, I don't care who he's affiliated or what he's doing. I mean, I might freeze the rent. Wow, that's a good thing. So anyway, Peter, let's start with what's the game plan? And one, he has to win, right? He has to get out of the general. But what are you hearing?
So what I'll say is that, Zoran, when he got into the race, he had a very clear idea of who he would, appeal to and what strategy he would run. Like, he focused on affordability. He said, that is something that I believe in. That is something that I think can appeal to people who might not otherwise vote for a socialist. He knew that he would get the support of young progressives. He knew he would get the support of Muslim voters and South Asian voters who want to see one of his own. But then by focusing on freeze the rent, he figured, I can get support from people in rent-stabilized apartments. That's half of the apartments in New York City. Now, of course, if he wins, he's going to have to deliver on that. Freezing the rent is relatively easy. I mean, de Blasio did it 3 or 4 times. All you have to do is appoint the right people to the Rent Guidelines Board. They review the data. They say, okay, there should be a 0% increase on rent-stabilized rents. What's tougher is some of his other promises, where he's saying that he wants to raise taxes on the rich, put a 2% income tax on New York City residents making over $1 million, increase corporate tax rates in order to fund things like universal child care and free MTA buses. That is going to require approval from the state legislature and from the governor. New York City does not have the power to raise income tax on its own residents. That needs to be done by the state. Governor Hochul has repeatedly said that she does not want to raise income tax. She says she's focused on affordability, just like Mamdani, and she doesn't think that raising taxes, even on the rich, helps with affordability. So the biggest sort of obstacle that I think Zoran is going to run into next year, if he wins and becomes mayor, is going to be trying to get some of his agenda through Albany. I'm not so concerned about the state legislature. Both the state Senate and the Assembly have, in their one-house budget proposals over the past few years, proposed increasing income taxes and corporate taxes slightly. Generally speaking, a lot of legislators are not opposed to the idea of raising taxes on the rich, but the governor has been very firm that she will not raise taxes. And she's very concerned about her general election next year, when she's probably going to be against Representative Stefanik. And she's afraid that, suburban moderates are going to see her as being too woke and too close to the New York City socialists. So I think she's going to resist pressure to raise taxes. But, DSA's plan, and I don't think it'll just be DSA. I think it will probably be DSA, it will be other organizations like WFP, and potentially even unions as well, which are now backing Zoran in the general. I think they're going to be organizing to go up to Albany next year. I think they're going to be making lots of calls to legislators and to the governor's office saying, New York City residents, and maybe New Yorkers more generally, want to see taxes on the rich to pay for social programs, especially as Trump is cutting so many programs that rely on federal funding. So I think that's going to be the big fight next year.
What does this mean for Antonio Delgado?
Well, that's a really good question, because Antonio Delgado...
Because you need a foil.
Right.
Conceivably.
And Antonio Delgado is not a DSA member. He's not a socialist. He has said, I'm a capitalist. So I would not expect him to get the sort of support from DSA that Mamdani got. Mamdani is a card-carrying member of the DSA. He was a DSA organizer for a while, even before going to the Assembly. Delgado is not, but Delgado has called for increased taxes on the rich. He's called for universal health care, universal child care. So I think he's probably more aligned with DSA and the progressives. I don't know if he can actually win a race against Hochul in the primary, but I think that Zoran's victory definitely will be beneficial to his campaign, and Zoran's supporters may try to boost Delgado just to put pressure on the governor. The governor right now, I think, is primarily concerned about her right flank. She's worried about conservatives thinking she's too far to the left. But maybe she also should think about her left flank and this risk that people who support Zoran, who want to see taxes on the rich and social programs like universal child care or free buses, are going to be reluctant to vote for her in the primary. I asked her spokesperson about that. I said, are you concerned that there are all these people who clearly support what Zoran is calling for, and the governor is standing against that? Could she lose that support? And, their argument is, we don't think people want to see taxes raised. So that's what they're sticking to. I think that the governor could embrace all of this new energy on the left and use that to fight back against Republicans in the general. One of the reasons that she came so close to losing against Zeldin a few years ago, it's not just that Republicans did very well in 22, it's also that Democrats didn't necessarily come out. So I think that the governor is very afraid of appearing to be too aligned with the left because she thinks that will alienate moderates. But maybe a better strategy, especially looking at Zoran's success, would be to want to bring the left onto her side. Zoran had 50,000 volunteers. Wouldn't it be nice if you had 50,000 volunteers for the governor going out in her general election? But she doesn't seem to see it that way. I think she is much more concerned about what suburban moderates think, and so she's resisting, the demands to tax the rich, and I think that could definitely help Delgado. Delgado raised about $1.4 million since entering the race. Now, the governor raised $4 million in the last 6 months and has $17.5 million in her war chest. She clearly has the advantage. She has a lot of institutional support. Again, I think it would be very difficult for Delgado to actually beat her, but if Zoran had not won, I think it would be impossible for him to beat her. The fact that there is this energy on the left and there's this demand to raise taxes on the rich, I think Delgado will be able to tap into that. He might be able to get more grassroots support, and maybe the governor will recognize I should embrace that to protect my left flank.
Peter, so let's talk collateral damage now.
Yeah.
One of the things you broke was Gonzalez Rojas.
Yes.
Running against Senator Ramos.
Yeah, we talked a little about...
Take a step back. One, right? That's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
He's filing. Anybody else? Again, you have the inside scoop here. Anybody else? Is it Congressmember Richie Torres? I've read in several posts that they're encouraging Councilmember Chiosei to take on Congressmember Jeffries. I've seen it milling around, right, whether it's real or not.
Yeah, I mean...
anybody else has to may have to get a brushback here or a primary?
So I think that other than, JGR going after Ramos, I think the next sort of primary challenge you'll see is Ian Huntley is going to challenge Stephanie Zinnerman again.
Oh, interesting.
Because that was last year. Ian Huntley was backed by DSA, ran against Zinnerman, who was backed by House Minority Leader Jeffries, and came within 500 votes. She has said, I think he tweeted last week, I will support anyone who challenges Stephanie Zinnerman, because Zinnerman is blocking increased housing development in the district. It's very widely expected within DSA that Ian Huntley is going to run again, and this time we'll have the support of Chi, we'll have the support of DSA, maybe he'll get an endorsement from the new mayor. So it's expected that Ian will probably be able to, defeat Zinnerman and, make it to the assembly. That'll be another kind of proxy fight between DSA and, Leader Jeffries.
How hard do you see DSA going against Senator Ramos?
Well,
what are your thoughts on that race?
It's not just DSA. So Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas is a member of DSA, but she has not actually been endorsed by DSA. So when she originally ran, DSA chose not to get involved in the race. And then she won, but she does not really caucus with DSA the way that, Assemblymember Mamdani...
Emily Gallagher.
Right. They are part of what's known as Socialists in Office. And JGR is not actually a member of Socialists in Office. She's just, she pays dues to DSA, but she's otherwise kind of independent. So I think that, a lot of DSA people will back her, but I'm not sure she'll actually formally apply for the endorsement. I think she'll also be backed, though, by WFP. Like, there were a lot of people who were very upset with Senator Ramos for endorsing former Governor Cuomo after running an anti-Cuomo campaign. It's not just DSA, it's kind of the broader progressive movement.
Do you think that's fair? There was a lot of people that endorsed former Governor Cuomo.
So the issue...
Do you think that it's fair that Senator Ramos has bore the brunt of that? There's a lot of people that were falling over each other to support Cuomo, that called for his resignation, said this guy, right, it's got to go. And then when they saw that likely was going to get the Democratic nomination, he had a lot of endorsements.
He did.
A lot of endorsements from people that called for him to resign. Do you think that's a fair sort of making her the person that bears the brunt for endorsing Cuomo, when actually she was technically one of the last people to get on board with Cuomo?
I think why people are focusing on Ramos so much is because she ran, like, she didn't just call for Cuomo to resign in 2021 and then endorsed him this year, as you said, many people did. She actually got into the race running against Andrew Cuomo and was part of that slate of progressives saying we are going to support each other to prevent Andrew Cuomo from winning. And then she turned. And so you saw a bunch of organizations like WFP, for instance, that had endorsed, Zoran and Adrian Adams and Ramos and Lander as part of an anti-Cuomo slate, then immediately dropped their endorsements of her because she'd been part of the anti-Cuomo slate and then she turned on it. And I think it was that betrayal that really rubbed people the wrong way, more so than just the fact that she had endorsed Cuomo. It was that she originally got into the race saying, we cannot let Andrew Cuomo be mayor, and then flipped.
Peter, what do you think of the Michael Blake primary against Congressmember Richie Torres? Do you think DSA gets on board there?
I don't know if DSA would endorse Blake. I don't think he's really he's not a DSA member. I don't think he's a socialist. I'm not surprised that he's challenging Torres. Obviously, he ran against Torres originally. Even during the mayoral race, I suspected he would choose to run in Congress. I don't think DSA will formally get involved in that race. DSA doesn't like to endorse in races that seem impossible. They only endorse in races where they see a potential path to victory. They will take risks, but they're not just going to hand out an endorsement to someone who has no chance. So I'm not sure that they would want to endorse Blake against Torres. I think that people believe that Torres can be beaten, but Blake may not be the person to do it.
Peter, what do you make of the general now? There was a poll, I don't know who commissioned it, but it has it really close. Like, is that real?
No.
What is that? How did all of a sudden things... polling has been way off, right?
Yeah,
But what was that poll? Who commissioned that poll?
That was Harris X. They did that poll showing that, it was kind of a statistical tie. If Adams dropped out, it was like a three-way race between Sliwa, Cuomo, and Mamdani. And yeah, I'm very skeptical of that. Harris X predicted that Cuomo would win by 15 points in the primary. So he lost by 12 points. I'm very skeptical. I put much more stock in the Data for Progress poll that came out last week, which showed Mamdani at 40% and former Governor Cuomo at 24%, and then Adams and Sliwa at about 15% each. I think that is more realistic. I think it's going to be almost impossible to defeat the Democratic nominee in the general election. Before Zoran won, I wrote a piece asking whether or not Zoran would run in the general if he lost the primary. And, my sort of conclusion was probably not, because it's very difficult to beat a Democratic nominee in New York City, where the Democrats have a massive registration advantage. You've already seen, since Zoran won, a lot of institutional Democrats and organizations coalescing behind him. So one of the first people to endorse Zoran after he won was Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichat-Hermelin, who is, the head of the Brooklyn machine, and not someone who is ideologically sympathetic to socialists. But she could read the election results the same as anyone else, and she knew that it made sense to get on board early. And, she's been out there defending Zoran. She even made a video, giving him a tour of Little Haiti in central Brooklyn. That, I think, is a powerful validator. The Manhattan Democratic Party, Keith Wright's operation, also flipped from Cuomo to Zoran. That matters in Harlem. Adriano Espaillat, who is generally opposed to Keith Wright's organization, but had also endorsed Cuomo, has also flipped. That's going to matter in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx.
Make a prediction. How soon do Congressmember Jeffries and Senator Schumer endorse?
It's difficult to say. I mean, Jeffries is meeting with Zoran tomorrow. That's sort of when they're having their big sit down. I think it is possible that Jeffries will endorse after that meeting, so this weekend or next week. I think if he doesn't do it then, he's probably not going to endorse at all. He's just going to stay out. But I will say, I don't think there's any way that he endorses Cuomo or Adams or Sliwa.
So you think he just stays neutral, or different in the worst case scenario, best case scenario for him?
Yeah, I think he'll either endorse Mamdani by next week, or he'll just stay neutral.
How about Senator Schumer?
I think if Jeffries endorses, then Schumer will probably follow. Otherwise, I think he'll probably stay neutral.
Peter, who has Zoran's ear? As people start jockeying, it's already started. Who are we kidding?
I mean, a lot of the former de Blasio people. Patrick Gaspard, I think Stephen Banks. Those are the people he's talking to. Obviously, anyone associated with Brad Lander, they had that cross endorsement. And that was, I believe, organized by Patrick Gaspard. So I really feel like the former de Blasio folks, other than obviously, the DSA, all of his fellow socialists in office. I mean, one of the people he's closest to in Albany is State Senator Jabari Brisport. So DSA certainly has his ear. I mean, DSA leadership has been in touch with the campaign regularly, since the very beginning of the primary. They continue to be. They will play a part in the general election. But outside of DSA and WFP, I think it would be sort of former de Blasio folks.
Peter, does he keep Commissioner Tisch?
That's a really good question.
Now you got to make a prediction, Peter. You've never been shy before, right?
I will predict that he does not.
Why?
Because I think that Commissioner Tisch, I mean, first of all, I'll say I will predict he will not. He might. I would, if I were advising him, I would say don't. I think it would be a mistake. I think that, Commissioner Tisch has overseen a lot of collaboration between the NYPD and ICE on criminal matters. And one of the things that Zoran has said is, I don't want the NYPD to be working with ICE in any capacity. So that, to me, seems like a point of tension. I think that, Commissioner Tisch has overseen a lot of aggressive policing of demonstrations, including, pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And Zoran, as someone who, is very open about his criticism of Israel and support for Palestinian rights, I think it becomes awkward for him to then be mayor overseeing a NYPD that is like arresting and brutalizing pro-Palestinian and anti-ICE protesters. I feel like that could alienate some of his base. So I think for Tish, if she wants to remain as commissioner, she would have to say, like, this is not, I was doing this stuff during the Adams administration because that was the policy of the administration. I am willing to sort of embrace a different strategy for the NYPD, get rid of the strategic response group, focus on not collaborating with ICE, probably move away from some of the broken windows policing, if that's what you want. And then Zoran could say, I've spoken with the commissioner and I believe that, her strategy is in line with what I want. But I think that if Tish doesn't want to do that, if she believes that the current strategy of the NYPD is what should be done, then it just feels like that is at odds in some ways with Zoran's approach to public safety. So I know a lot of people believe that he should keep Tish, and I definitely think that politically it makes sense. It helps him seem, less radical. It reassures a lot of, skeptical business leaders and more moderate Democrats. But my concern would be, in terms of the actual policy implementation, that would sort of lead to tension between what he's been promising and what, the NYPD is actually doing.
Peter, if Zoran wins the nomination, which is likely, he'll be mayor in November, right? Anything can happen, but as it looks right now, he's close. Does it mean that Crystal Hudson is the next speaker of the city council? Who won the day, right, in terms of the jockeying to be speaker? Now that it's become common for mayors to try to put their thumb on the scale, Eric Adams tried with Francisco Moya. De Blasio leaned in with Melissa, right? Then he tried to lean in again, but it didn't quite work out.
Right.
But he set the precedence. Like, I'm going to take it from county leaders, and I'm going to try to designate my own speaker. What do you think this means? Who won the day in terms of Councilmember Julie Menon, who's been mentioned, Councilmember Amanda Farias, and Councilmember Crystal Hudson? Those are the three. I mean, I've heard other names, Councilmember Kevin Riley, others, Councilmember De La Rosa, but primarily it's been those three, unless I'm missing something. But what do you think that means, the Zoran potential winning means to the speaker's race?
I think it's either beneficial.
I would say this. Chiose on this podcast said he's on board 100% with Crystal Hudson.
Yeah.
And wanted to sort of lean in on that. Like, I'm with Crystal.
I think it probably is good for Crystal, but I think that, as we saw with Adams, who was not able to get Moya, sometimes there is a desire by the council to go for who the mayor doesn't want. So I think Menon is probably not going to get it if you have a Mayor Mamdani, but you could have a compromise pick if they wanted to go with someone like Amanda.
Got it. Peter, last question, because we got to wrap this up. What was the most important, or name the endorsement that you think was the most important to Zoran's victory? Congressmember Ocasio-Cortez, Comptroller Brad Lander, or was it Attorney General Tish James, who did a series of robocalls, right, and came in at the end to say, hey, I'm ranking you anyone but Andrew Cuomo? What do you think was the most impactful endorsement and or support out of those three? Or maybe I'm missing one, I don't know, but those are the ones that seem to have gotten the most coverage.
Yeah, I think, the Lander endorsement really was key, that cross endorsement, for what it said about how ranked choice voting works. I think it brought a lot of his supporters into Zoran. Obviously, we had expected, going into Election Day that Zoran might not win in the first round. It might only be after getting Lander's, voters. Obviously, that didn't happen. He clearly beat Cuomo by 12 points, even in the first round. But I think Lander coming out and supporting him may have prompted Lander supporters to rank Zoran number 1 and then Lander number 2, whereas they might have been less likely to rank Zoran, especially since I think right around the time that Lander came out, there were a lot of concerns over, accusations that Zoran was being anti-Semitic with his criticism of Israel. So I think having Lander as a validator who could say, I know Zoran, I trust him, he's a good guy, even if I don't agree with him 100% of the time, I think that definitely helped, especially, Jewish liberals come around to embracing Zoran.
Peter, thank you again for doing this. This was fun. Anything you want to add that I forgot to mention?
No, I think that's it, Just, I hope to come back before the election and then hopefully once Zoran is in office and talk about what that's like.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you and all the best to you, always.
Thanks.